Today's Straight Talk, I'm interviewing a true champion. His name is John Brogden. Now, John has had an incredible career so far. By the time he was 33, John was leader of the opposition for the New South Wales Liberal Party. He has since retired from politics and has had to battle his own mental demons, like all of us, throughout his life. He is now CEO of Landcom and is chairman of Lifeline. So naturally, one of the main talking points of this discussion is the importance of mental health in this current climate. We discuss John's battle with mental illness, the scary numbers around suicide in Australia, what to do when you or someone you know is experiencing difficulties, plus a lot more. Honestly, there was so much ground to cover, but as always, we give you the most relevant information you need to know just right now. So let's get into it. G'day, John. How you going, mate?
Mark, I'm well. Great to see you.
Same here. I'm really, well, to be frank with you, I'm quite privileged to have John Brogden here. And for those of you who don't know who John Brogden is, he did have a very long and illustrious political career, but he's really here today as CEO of Landcom, which is a big job, full-time job, but probably importantly for us, all our listeners, is John is the chairman of Lifeline, which is one of those organisations, I think, particularly during the current environment, that we cannot do without. And John's been a long-time friend of mine too, so he has kindly agreed to come onto this. And I guess, John, for those people who don't know, let's just go way back maybe, how long ago was your political career at its height? How many years ago?
Well, I went into Parliament in 1996 when I was 27. I became opposition leader in 2002 when I was 33, literally on my 33rd birthday.
The youngest opposition leader for the Liberal Party, both federal and state ever, would that be right?
Leader of a political party, I think Labor or Liberal. Yeah,
Labor or Liberal.
Yeah.
At federal or state?
Federal or state, yes. Yeah.
Somewhat of an achievement at 33.
My 33rd birthday.
And can I ask you this? We all like to pat ourselves on the back when these things happen, but what's the impact of something like that? I mean, do those things have an impact on you?
Yeah, well, look, I'd always been ambitious. I hope to think, Mark, I was restlessly ambitious, not ruthlessly ambitious. My grandmother, who was an incredible influence in my life, not at all political, a lady, but she said, be careful on the way up, don't climb over people because you'll need them on the way down. And it was a great lesson in life. But look, the impact was instant, right? You go from being a somebody, sort of not quite a nobody, but to very much a somebody. And I learned a lesson, and you'll appreciate this as a leader. That great saying, it's lonely at the top, the opposition leader's office in Parliament House in Sydney on Macquarie Street is a big, massive office, wood panelled, all that sort of stuff. And I had defeated a woman called Kerry Chikarovsky, with whom I'm friends today. It was never personal.
I remember Chika very well.
It was never personal, it was always political. And she handed over the office to me, and of course she'd cleared it out, Mark. And she left and closed the door, and I instantly understood what it's lonely at the top means. It was a great cavernous office, not even a pencil in the drawer. And I looked around at the closed doors and thought, wow, I know what that means now. So there was that impact. You have to believe in yourself. You have to really believe in yourself. And therefore you walk that fine line, I think, between confidence and arrogance. And it is a very fine line. And for me at that age, I was the youngest person in the party that I led, in the party room. There were people in there well and truly old enough to be my father or mother. And I decided I just had to work like a madman to prove to them that I could do the job.
So you were for our business people out there, you're in the business of politics at the time.
Yes.
So, and being in the business of politics, all of a sudden, you're running your business as the leader of the opposition. That's your business. You're the leader of the opposition, right. And there's a whole lot of people who you are now responsible to and for, including all the people who vote for you.
Yes.
And in that case, it's someone like me.
Yep.
I know when I was 33, and I put something recently up on my social mediums about something that happened to me when I turned 30, that it was a bit of a important turning point in my life. Things weren't great for me, and I had to get up and make some changes to my life. Looking back on 33, I thought I was Superman.
Yes.
And in fact, I was probably just a man. Do you look back on that period when you just say the fine line between arrogance and whatever? I mean, do you look back and think to yourself, wait a minute, there were a lot of things that I now know that I would have done then if I had much more maturity? Is it a maturity thing?
It's funny. I don't think of it in that way. What I do know is when I left politics, about 9 months later, I went to run a company called Manchester Unity, which was an old mutual company. We had health insurance, a little bit of life insurance, retirement villages, nursing homes. And the office was over at St Leonard's on the north side of Sydney. And I got to the end of the first week, the Friday afternoon of the first week, and I got up and walked to the window and sort of looked back to Parliament House and said to myself, God, I didn't know what I didn't know. You know, so a great mate of mine made tens of millions of dollars in telecommunications in Australia, and he worked like a navvy in his 20s and 30s. And I said, how did you do it? How did you put so much at risk? He said, John, I didn't know what I had to lose, you know. So
sometimes naivety is good.
Exactly. And to some extent, if you don't have anything, you can't lose anything. So for me, I thought, well, I'm 33. I want the job. I can do the job. If I lose, it's not the end of the world. I'll get another crack into the future. So it wasn't so much regrets, at least not at the beginning, but it was a case of when I left politics and went into business, I just realised how little I knew about business. And the other thing is, if I ever went back to politics, and I don't plan to, I'd be a much better premier today than I would have been then.
So if you're talking to now someone in their 30s who's kicked off in business, and to them, it's like being the leader of the opposition, because all of a sudden they're running a business and they're out there on their own, as you say. It's a very lonely place.
Yes.
What are the things they've got to look for? I mean, what would you say to them when they walk into their business premises today and there's no one there? They get there before everybody else. They get there at 6:30 a.m. because they couldn't sleep the night before, and they're thinking about shit like, you know, what am I going to do today? I've got this drama and that drama I've got to solve. Because as a leader, you're basically putting out bushfires all the time. That's your job.
You're juggling.
Yeah, all day.
Yeah.
And there's a problem.
You actually learn a great skill, and it's the same sort of skill you would learn, you know, having run businesses and new people learn, which is particularly today, right? When you used to run a business, particularly big businesses, you didn't care about environmental issues or community issues or social issues, right? You know, in the old days, you ran a bank and you ran a bank to make money, and who cared about the rest? Those bank CEOs now, they've got to juggle a whole lot of balls, and making a profit is just one of them. It used to be the only one. It's just one of them now, because your share price can be affected by the non-financial things that you do in terms of treating customers poorly.
Reputation.
So the game's changed. Leadership hasn't changed. Management, I think, has changed, and it's become a much broader perspective. And we do know that, you hear people talk about people being their most important asset. And I used to think that was a bit of bullshit 10 or 15 years ago. Now I have 180 staff, and I've run bigger organisations since I left politics. And it's true. The older I get, I realise when I'm employing somebody, if they've got that far to be a CFO, they can probably do the CFO job, right? 99 out of 100 will be able to do that job or this job or that job. It's about how they fit into the organisation. So I'd say to that early person and Jack Welch, the great businessman who just died recently, I heard him speak in Sydney about 20 years ago and sat on the head table with him, and he was one of those unbelievably charismatic figures, ran GE, as you know, for many years. And
I knew him quite well.
Yeah. And one of those blokes who you sit down at the table and he'd done the homework, he remembered your name. He'd already been given your name, he remembered, and that, you know, here you are. I was a very young opposition leader, and here he is, a global businessman, remembers your name. You think, wow. Anyway, he said there are 4 types of people in a business. He said there's the ones who don't get the business, don't get the culture, get rid of them. People who get the culture, get the business, keep them, promote them, they're the best. There's people who don't get the business but get the culture. He said that person you give a second chance, you give them a third chance. Worst person in the business, where they get the business but they don't get the culture. He said they'll never fail to deliver on a budget, they'll never be late, all of those things, but they don't believe in the culture of the organisation. In fact, they're poisonous. And I'd say to somebody, in the early days, you just want people who can write business, who can build your business. But if they don't believe in the culture of the joint, they are going to be eroding the organisation at the same time. So you don't want people, and it's become a real tenet for me in the organisations that I run, is you might be brilliant at your job, but if you don't get the culture and you're stabbing people on the back all the time and you don't believe in what we believe in, you're the wrong person for the joint. And they're really hard to get rid of because they always make budget, they're always on time, and they always deliver, but they're draining the business, they're tearing it down in another way that's often less obvious. And it's why people really are important to an organisation. So I'd say to that person back then, get the right people around you.
So someone like, how old are you now?
I'm 51.
Okay, you're 51 years of age. You're very composed and poised, and actually the way you just expressed everything was quite beautiful, very eloquent, and no doubt that's come through a lot of experience, training, education, exposure, etc. Take yourself back to 33.
Yeah.
That wasn't quite the case.
No.
And this is sort of going to push us into the Lifeline stuff. But
Sure.
what's the difference between you now, right
Yeah.
now, and you back in that period where you had
Yeah.
a really dark period?
Yeah. Self-awareness. If you'd said to me at 33, John, are you self-aware? I'd have said, what's all that Buddhist bullshit about? What are you talking about? Of course I'm self-aware. Couldn't have been further from the truth. And in Australia, part of our culture is we say to young people, what do you want to do? What job do you want? What do you want to be? A lawyer? Do you want to be a builder? What do you want to do? What we don't do, which I think makes a massive difference, is ask people, what are you good at? Because we should choose our life, choose our career on what we're good at and what we're bad at, and acknowledge we're bad at some things. I mean, it's a rare person who's good at everything. It's a bit like when you're a chairman of a board and you choose a CEO, you're not going to get everything, right? You're going to get 8 out of 10, and you've just got to realise that the 2 out of 10 they don't do as well, you can compensate for with other employees who report to them and the like. So I wasn't self-aware. I often think back, and when I'm talking to people who on the up of their career, like you do all the time, you do obviously say, how old are you? Because in your mind, you sort of, that's part of setting up where they are in their career. And they say 33, and you can see other people say, geez, that's just too young. And I think, shit, I was opposition leader at that age. So I'm open to that. So for me, it was a lack of self-awareness. So what I've become over time is more aware of what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, because when you build a strategy for a company or for your life or whatever it is, you've got to know what you're good at and what you're bad at, what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. A business can't do everything because it'll do nothing properly. So consciously, I became more aware of what I'm good at and what I'm bad at.
What were you bad at?
Back then particularly, I was bad at empathy with my staff. With people out in the community, I connected instantly with people, particularly if they'd been through real personal crisis, lost a child and those sorts of things. You connected very...
Why were you strong at that?
I guess because I've always been a very emotional person in that sense, and always felt that partly there for the grace of God go I, Mark.
Yep.
You sort of, particularly with disabled people, you and I get up every morning, swing our legs out of bed, go and take a piss and get dressed and walk
I do
out the
about
door.
3 times a night at the moment, but anyway, go on.
But we don't think twice about putting on our own clothes, toiling at ourselves, driving ourselves around. And you see people in wheelchairs and you think, what an incredible life you must have. Every day is a struggle and you get through it. And here you are talking to me in a community thing, you've dressed yourself, all that sort of stuff. So I was always very empathetic with people like that. But with staff, it was a dictatorship. I used to say, it's a democracy out there, it's a dictatorship in here.
Well, you actually said that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So just
But
go
where
and
did
do
you
it.
get that idea from? Like, had you seen that somewhere? Or
well-
your predecessor was Kerry Chigorovsky?
Yeah,
like,
look, I'd worked in politics,
Yep.
and politics is a famous game for tough bosses, and for tough language, for tough decisions. And because of the combative style in politics, you've got to be willing to go somebody. And it doesn't have to be personal. And I think what we've learnt with mental health in politics and everywhere else is you can win a point, you don't have to destroy somebody. That's just, that's evil if you go out for the fun of destroying somebody. But ripping your policy to pieces and winning the day in Parliament or winning the day in the media, you've got to have a bit of mongrel for that. So I had enough mongrel. I guess the challenge for me back then, Mark, was I could shit, shower and shave and stand in front of the cameras, go into Parliament, talk in a community group, and I felt myself getting better at all those things as I became more confident. But behind the scenes, I was quite depressed. So once the lights were out and once the interviews had stopped, I'd go back to the office, I'd be quite flat, go back home, be very flat, and I'm not interested in much else. And what I became slowly aware of is that I had a mask for work. I'd put a mask on, and then when I took that off, I was deeply depressed. And part of it was, despite when I look back and your kind words, I think, wow, what an achievement at 33. Back then, I thought I'd achieved nothing. And for me, my life was, I often imagine a set of escalators in a shopping centre. I'd go up 27, Member of Parliament, safe seat, not good enough. 30, Shadow Minister, not good enough. 33, Opposition Leader, not good enough. And I've learnt since then to stop and smell the roses, and not in an arrogant way, but to realise that, look, you have done well, John. You've done that well. Maybe you've done that badly. So I would overcompensate when I did stuff well. I'd say to myself, I didn't do that well enough, even though I know. And I'll give you an example. If I did things badly, I would punish myself. So I'd do a function for you. We'd do a function for the Roosters or something, and I'd speak, and I'd come back to you and say, "Oh, how was that, Mark? How pathetic." I mean, I'd give this speech. It was a good speech. I'd have to get...
We're actually glad you had been there in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. You're
Yep.
grateful. And I say,
Yep.
how was that? And you say, oh, it was great, John. And I think, it wasn't that good, and I got that wrong. And so I thought, that's pathetic.
Too hard on yourself.
Yeah, that's pathetic. I've got to change that. So I changed my line to, oh, is that what you're looking for, Mark? Which is another way of saying, is that okay? And that was an example of it. Even when I was at my best, I wasn't sure of myself. So, it all ended, as you know, in a suicide attempt, which was really difficult. And that unmasked what had been probably a 15-year journey of depression.
That you didn't even realise? Or for the future?
No, backwards.
Backwards.
And I still have it now. I'm medicated for it. I have suicidal ideation, which is suicide is part of my makeup if things go wrong. So that's part of me as well. But what I now know, looking back, is that restlessness, up to one level, not good enough, up, never good enough, don't smell the roses, was driving away from the depression. It was my way I'd deal with the depression, just go harder.
Until you get to the point you can't go any further.
Yeah, and it's empty. You
Yeah.
have all these wins. I remember when I was 30, I'd just been re-elected into Parliament after my first term. I had a very safe seat, thanks to the people of Pittwater. Loving wife, Lucy, who we're still married and have lovely children and a lovely marriage. And I was inconsolably miserable, and so most people that have a success and feel good about it, I would, not good enough, John, go harder.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. I think part of it's a lack of self-belief, which is ironic because you look from the outside and say, shit.
That's what you said. You're so poised and so polished.
Yeah.
Do you still have a bit of it?
Not as much, no, because I've realised what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. And I just don't do the stuff I'm bad at. And I've also realised with depression what depresses me, what upsets me, what makes me unsettled, and I don't do those things as well.
Well, can I ask you this now? And I really appreciate you being so honest.
Sure.
And I guess that's part of the way to deal with these things is you've got to be honest with yourself.
Yes.
We have in this country right now, we've had people going through drought,
Yep.
flood, fire, COVID.
Yes.
We're talking about small business owners, okay? And to some extent, many of them are doing small business or in business for themselves because they always felt they could do better than they were when they were an employee. And for many of them, it's never good enough. And a lot of the times it's largely represented by the fact that they can't pay bills or they're not doing as well as the guy down the road or the girl down the road or their peers.
And Mark, also...
What about that? How would you talk to them?
Yeah, so you've also got those people who are human as well. So they've got a kid who's ill, they've got a partner who's in hospital and they've still got to keep opening the doors every day. So
what do you say to them?
Yeah.
This is not Lifeline, by the way. This is John Brogden speaking his own thing.
Sure. It would be, don't do it alone. Never suffer in silence and talk to your friends, talk to your long-term friends in particular. If you have to, talk to your GP. But don't, for many of those people, mental health is extraordinary. And all of the effort you put in when you think of cafe owners, right, costs tens of thousands on the low side to fit out a shop and to have it all ready and buy the good equipment. And, you're there, if you're running a coffee shop, you're there from 4 a.m. to whatever time in the afternoon. And you put also yourself into that, right? Yep. You don't do that just for...
You're nice to every single person who walks in the joint.
Exactly. And you love the joint, you're proud, your name's on the door or the name you've always wanted to have on the door's on the door. And that can be very personally difficult when that fails. And with COVID, of course, it's out of your control. Nobody anticipated a worldwide pandemic with a lockdown. And the other point I always think about people, Mark, is you don't know where they are in their business or their personal journey. So they may have just bought a house. They may have just got divorced. They may have just taken out a big loan. On and on it goes. That might be, March might be the big credit card bill for them every year, and bang, it hits, and there's no revenue to back it. So I would say to those people, please don't suffer in silence. Please talk to people.
What does that mean, though? Who do they talk to?
Friends.
Who did you talk to?
Our best friends, doctors.
You went and saw your GP, or
Well, for me, it was very different for me, of course, because it was also public, and so I was taken by an ambulance from my office, where I tried to take my own life, to North Shore Hospital and put in the in the mental health wing and scheduled. Literally they ask you a question.
Under Mental Health Act.
Yeah. Are you a danger to yourself or anybody else? And I answered yes, and they schedule you. You can't leave. And then I went across to a private
Is that the Northside Clinic?
Yeah, then I went to the Northside Clinic. Okay. Yeah. So for me, it was I sort of had nowhere to go. I had no choice. And I was looked after very well, I have to say, and for which I'm very grateful. But talk to people. I mean, you can see people with this hair. I reckon you can see some people as if they've got weights on themselves and they're weighed down. Now, I'm not saying that talking to somebody's going to fix the problem, but if you can express your feelings to someone else, maybe they're in a similar situation, maybe they can help you. Or can I come and help you? Can I come and do a shift in the factory? Can I, mate, can I help you out? If you've got good friends like that.
This is what you're saying that we should be saying to someone who we recognise these symptoms in or we know them?
They're absolutely right. So we run an incredible course at Lifeline called the Accidental Counsellor. So here's where it hits the road. So if you and I are mates and we're sitting down one day and I'm worried about you, in the old days we'd say, mate, let's go and have a beer. Let's go to the pub and have a beer. Or let's go for a swim or a surf or let's go and see a movie, whatever, right? That never fixes it, right? It just sort of, it pushes it off for a couple of hours or masks over it. So we've got this course where we encourage you to ask the direct question, which is, ultimately, do you feel suicidal? Do you think you're going to hurt yourself? Now, every bone in our body says, I can't ask that question. How can I ask that question? And many people would worry we're actually putting that in somebody's mind. But the reality is this, all of the science and all of our experience tells us it drags it out. So we call this the accidental counsellor, and you ask the direct question. You ask somebody, are you feeling suicidal? Do you want to hurt yourself? Now, every bone in my body tells me, wow, I can't ask that question. I've known Mark for 20 years. I couldn't ask him that question. And the other thing is you think I might be putting the idea in your mind, but a bit like sort of sucking the snake poison in the old westerns out, you bring it out. And what we find is people will tell you the truth because you've cut through the bullshit. You're not saying, how are you, mate? And she'll be all right and let's go and have it. You're cutting right through. Thankfully, most people will say no, but they'll tell you what's wrong. I've got real problems with my business. I owe 20 grand and I can't pay it, or split up with my partner, whatever it might be.
Because I've got a mate right now.
Yeah. Are you worried about?
Oh, yeah, correct. But I don't quite know how to go about this.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you've told me that.
Yeah, and if he or she says, yes, I am suicidal, most of us think, well, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know what to do. But you're not a heart specialist, but I think you know what to do if somebody next to you had a heart attack. Whether it's CPR or whether you call AAA, you'd know what to do. You wouldn't walk past a person with a heart attack. So I give the same advice. If they're suicidal, you get them to an emergency department or you ring AAA straight away. But the other role that Lifeline plays, of which I'm chairman, our number's 13, 11, 14, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most people think appropriately it's for people who are in crisis or suicidal themselves. But I'd recommend to somebody like you, Mark, ring up Lifeline and say, I've got a mate who I'm really worried about. What do I say? How do I do it? So we offer that sort of support and counselling as well. Because how often do we have, sadly, a friend or an acquaintance who takes their own life and you say to yourself, gee, I wish I'd known, I would have done more. I didn't know, or I thought there was something wrong but I didn't know he or she was that unwell, that sick, and I didn't know they were going to take their own life. So we do recommend the very frontal approach, which is ask them that question, bring it out of them, and get them some help that they need. And the other thing with suicide is that you don't have to be mentally ill, or you don't have to have a history of mental illness to take your own life. It can be that, you're going really well in your business, then your marriage falls to pieces, or your business falls to pieces, and you're in strife, you're in crisis, and at that point, you think the only way out of this is suicide. If I take, and I've been there, I know what it's like. You think to yourself, I've become such a burden on everyone around me. I've made a fool of myself and I've brought all this embarrassment upon them. Or my business, I'm going to send the whole family broken and lose the house sort of thing. And you think the best way out of this, not the only way, the best way out of this is to take your own life. And a lot of people in the old days would be judgmental and say, well, that's a coward's way out. I don't think people think that way anymore, because we've come to realise that it's something we can do something about. There are 3,200 Australians who'll take their own life most likely this year, Mark. Half will die on the roads. So you think of all the effort we put on the roads. Young people won't remember this, but, the introduction of RBT back in the 80s, speed signs, speed cameras, on and on the list goes, all aimed at one thing, slowing people down, getting them to drive safe, to save lives. At the same time, suicide has been going up.
And well, it's interesting. I live in Watson's Bay. It's curious to me generally speaking, around Christmas time, I see the police emergency services there all the time, literally every day.
Yeah.
It's very rarely written about or put on television. I just think they probably don't want to promote it. But it's funny, over the last 2 months, which is rare at this time of year, for me to see them there a lot. I've seen them there a lot. I heard you interviewed recently on 2GB. It might have been on Ben Ford or one of those, or Jonesy. What does Lifeline think, in your capacity as chairman of Lifeline? What is Lifeline thinking about all these various things that have been hitting the small business sector? I mean, are you worried? Is Lifeline worried about the net effect on small business owners?
Well, talking to you in June 2020, the one thing that I reckon calmed everything down, including mental illness, was JobKeeper. Very expensive to the taxpayers. You know, you and I and our kids and all that are going to be paying it off for years. But what it did is take a lot of grief out of the community. Now, not everybody got it. Some people are getting more than they got paid before on it. But putting it aside, in general, it calmed people right down. And we noticed that. We noticed these calls beginning to rise, and then when
But just before JobKeeper got announced, or got released?
By and large, yeah, when it got announced. Not when the money came, but when it got announced.
Right.
It calmed people down.
Wow.
And I reckon the flip side of that coin is, if it didn't exist, suicide and mental illness and stress and pressure would have gone through the roof. So the worry we have now is when that goes, particularly for some of your small business people who are keeping their businesses alive, when that goes, we all know things won't go back to normal like that. That's
Totally.
The one that you could shut the joint down like that, you can't turn it on again like that. And let alone, that's just Australia. What about the people we trade with around the world? And tourism's going to take years to get back to anything like normal. So that's where we're worried. We're worried when JobKeeper comes off, people will, have I got my old job back? Have I got a new job? Does the new job pay as much as the old job? Do I enjoy it? As we know, the stats show people over 50 really struggle to come back into the workforce after they lose their jobs in bad economic times. We haven't seen a recession, for a hell of a long time. Most young people don't even know what a recession is. They've never lived through one. They've never lived through joblessness in the scale that we're about to see.
High unemployment.
Yep. So we anticipate it'll kick up again when JobKeeper comes off.
So have you does Lifeline, does someone like Lifeline make representations to, Josh Frydenberg and the Prime Minister, etc.?
Well, we've made it public and privately that this has to be done carefully. You can't. The risk of flicking the switch off rather than phasing it out is high. And look, I think the government's very genuine on this. They stood up and gave Lifeline funding at the beginning of this, along with the state governments. We basically got $15 million in a couple of weeks from all the state governments to keep us going. Our calls went up. We usually do 2,500 calls a day. With the bushfires, they went up to 2,900. With COVID, they got as high as 3,200 a day.
Wow.
We've been around for 57 years at Lifeline. We've never seen call volumes like that, never. So this is a unique time in every sense in Australia. And for us, we just think we have to manage those people as they come off, because it will be very confronting, very confronting.
I scratch my head though. I mean, when you tell me the numbers, in excess of 3,000 people will die over a 12-month period from suicide. And then I look at the COVID numbers, and we're talking about 110, 15, whatever the number ended up being in terms of deaths. Just relatively speaking, just in a relative sense, we're throwing hundreds of billions at COVID, and I know it's a bigger community deal, but there's some sort of referencing back. I mean, it just seems to me we're not putting enough money towards something like Lifeline, or putting something more money towards prevention of suicide.
We're not.
And mental health generally. Yeah,
I'm an optimist though, I want to say, Mark. A lot of people will just look at the negative on mental health in terms of we're not spending enough, and I look at the positive, which is in the last 20 years we've come an enormous way. Like you and I would do, 20 years ago we wouldn't mention the word suicide.
Or mental health.
But we wouldn't talk about suicide. Yeah. So we've come a long way, but the numbers have gone up. So we've never spent so much money on suicide. We've never talked about it, by and large, very positively, ever this much, yet suicides are going up. And there are any number of theories why that's happening, but the reality is they keep going up stubbornly. Interestingly, most people think, and it's a bit of an urban myth, that it's young people are the growth.
Well, I thought that is not the case.
It's actually men 60 and over.
Really?
Yes, which is fascinating for a lot of small business people, because their life in their mind, at a time where you'd think they're going to enjoy their life, they're going to retire or semi-retire and enjoy their life, they take their life, they take their own life. So that's where the growth is. There's growth in two areas, which is alarming. Biggest growth in suicide in Australia, men over 60, as I said. We're also seeing, and this is tragic, but not in large numbers, and this is across the Western world, the advanced world, suicides dropping for kids under 10. And that's...
Say that again?
Yeah. We're now beginning to see in the Western world kids under 10 suicide. And that's just horrific. I blame social media a bit. You know, in the old days, you might bully somebody in the playground and you might have a fight or you might call them fat or stupid or whatever. And that was done. You know, in the end, we all know that was malicious and unhelpful and could lead some kids to mental illness and to suicide. But now they can do it 24 hours a day, Mark. And they can do it behind the cowardice of social media. You know, you should kill yourself, you're ugly, you're fat, you're stupid. And that is not good. And also the fact that, you know, at least we could go home if we were bullied or whatever and you'd be at home and you'd go to sleep at some stage. This thing's going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think that's one of the problems that we have. But we do need to spend more, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, look at the money we pour into saving people on the roads successfully. We've proved to do it successfully. But it's not just money, it's community attitude, it's knowing how to reach out to people, it's knowing how to intervene. It's my great post-political public objective, Mark, is that we treat mental health in the same way we think about and talk about, but feel in our hearts about physical health. And we've come a long way, right? You know, if I know you, but I know if somebody came in today and said, listen, mate, I've just been diagnosed with bipolar, I need some time off, you'd say, no problems. No problems, mate. Just as if they'd come in and said, I've got cancer, got prostate cancer, no problems, mate. Breast cancer, whatever it might be. 20 years ago, you'd say, got to sack that bloke. He's hopeless, or got to get him out of a high-pressure job, whatever it might be. So we're better now than we used to be. But it's some say we've got better in talking about it, but we haven't. We're better in talking about it, but not reducing the stigma. So there's still a bit of a stigma.
Well,
attached.
It's funny, you know, like I had a long relationship with somebody who had mental health problems, and I'm not going to say her name, but for 16 years of it, and I was one of those people who was as a businessman, and even during my period prior to that in the law firm, I not only didn't have any clue about what that was, but to be honest with you, I didn't care.
No.
I mean, only because I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have cared if I understood it.
Yeah.
And she was the closest thing in my life to me. And then I got confronted with this diagnosis of bipolar and a few other things, and in the bipolar, like catatonic depression.
No.
And then when it was the other way, it was like complete
Superhero stuff.
stuff. And for me, at the time, and it's not the case today, but at the time I felt it was more about me. I was more standing back observing somebody,
Yes.
and I never felt part of it.
Yes.
And but you know, I feel part of it. But I think there needs to be an education program. I mean, we need to become comfortable with it. Like, as you say, it's just like someone who's broken their arm, and they've got to get it repaired, or and we need to become. I needed someone to educate me about this stuff. I needed to become more comfortable with it. I need to understand. I need to think it's much more prevalent than you know. Like I was just saying, I'm the only person in the world that's being affected by this, or my particular relationship was the only person being affected by this. I mean, the amount of trauma it caused in my life and my children's lives and in her life, it was like really terrible. And sometimes I used to get really angry with her because I used to think it was her.
Doing it on purpose.
Why would you do this? And then I used to think things, just get out of it.
Yeah,
get over it.
Yeah.
You'll be right. Just get over it. It's just like you got the flu. Be okay tomorrow. When in actual fact, it's not the case. The medication has actually helped her along, and she's a wonderful person today. And
Mark,
I have experienced that.
Can I bring this back to small business? So organisations like my organisation, Landcom, 180 staff, we have an employee assistance program, EAP. We pay for that, and the company's available to our staff and to their family members to help them through personal issues and maybe some work issues, but mostly mental health stuff.
How do they know about it?
Well, I plug it all the time. And because everybody knows my story, either I tell them or they can read about it or they've heard about it.
That's why it's important for you to be honest with it. That's
exactly.
a big deal.
Makes a big deal. And the biggest deal is people sit there in the business and say, well, he's the boss And if he can have mental illness and talk about it, then I can talk about it.
Which is why I
as
just
well.
related the story myself.
Yeah, it's very critical.
Because people think you're going to judge them.
Yeah. So we have this employee assistance program, which we can pay for. If you're 10 people at the milk bar on the corner, you can't afford that. And if you're 10 people at the milk bar and one person goes off sick, that's 10% of your workforce. That's like 18 people going off sick for 6 weeks in my joint. That's enormous. So I reckon the government should provide an employee assistance program for free to small businesses. And here's why. Not only is
Is this federal or state now?
Federal, I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care, probably the feds. This is why this is important, right? Not only is it the right thing to do, we all know it's the right thing to do, just in the same way, we wouldn't blink if one of our very, very loyal, hard-working female staff members said, I've got breast cancer. You know, we know exactly what to do because we all know someone who's had breast cancer or some sort of cancer. The office would raise money for them, right? You know, where everyone would cover her job. There'd be no thinking about it. No one would blink. You just get in and do it. But with mental health, there's a thing called absenteeism. You're not in the office. In mental health, there's a thing called presenteeism, which is you're in the business, but you're not really there, right? You know, you think you've got a problem at home. You might have domestic violence at home. You might have a kid who's going through tough times. You might have depression yourself, whatever it might be. So you might physically be there, but you're not mentally there. So that business is losing money. The stats done by some of the big firms show that there are billions of dollars of lost productivity in Australian businesses, courtesy of people and mental illness. So not only is it the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do for your business. But you can't do it if you're a hairdresser with 5 employees. You just can't employ an employee assistance program staffed by professionals to help people through difficult times. So I reckon government should provide that. I reckon it would help enormously with small businesses, and it would be a way of ensuring that people stay in work and hopefully stay in a job and get the help they need.
And what does that look like? I mean, are we talking about like a job keeper type environment where the government says, listen, the government will put, let's say, for example, $500 a week towards this particular individual whilst this individual is on leave and getting treated, and also we'll help that individual get treated?
No, it's slightly different. There would be a number for every small business in Australia. You can work that out through the tax office. You know who's a small business or medium, whatever you do. Every place with under 20 employees, you have to choose a threshold. So my idea is it's a service provided to every small or medium-sized business in Australia, cut-off point, whatever that might be. You can work that out easily through the tax office. And it's a number available to a small business staff member, 24 and the small business person, 24 hours a day to help them with mental health concerns, whether it's them or their family or the like. And because I guarantee you, we're in the middle of the CBD of Sydney, any of these big firms around here will have an employee assistance program that helps their staff. And I've used it. I had a woman in one of the businesses I was running, and she came in on Monday and she said, John, as you know, I'm divorced. She's had a terrible divorce, very bad relationship with the ex-husband, young boys, sort of 10 and 12. And she said, one of the more remarkable things I've ever had in my life, let alone my business life, she said, John, my ex-husband rang on Friday and said he couldn't take the boys over the weekend. I said, okay, you know, bloody useless ex-husband. She said, he rang me today, Monday, and told me the reason he couldn't do it is he's in prison. So he'd gone to prison. And she said, what do I do? So we had this employee assistance line, staffed psychologists. I said, let's ring them, bang, 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 speakerphone, close the door, let's have a chat. That afternoon, she was seeing them face to face to help her get through that difficult time, because otherwise most people would have fallen to pieces. So this was about helping her. A, it's the right thing to do, and B, it help my business. So that sort of service, and all these things happen to us every
Is
day.
those services available outside?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the government would just have to contract a number of services to do it, because small businesses just can't afford it. And it's, you know, for them, buying another fridge for the fish and chip shop is the more important thing than anything else, and, you know, releasing that or buying that. So I understand why it's hard for small businesses, and it's unfair because most big businesses factor it in. Public sector, Australian public sector, state, all have it. They all have it. So
people working in the public sector, in other words, public servants, they all have access to these things.
Of course they do. Governments do it without blinking. In fact, you know, government would be in trouble for not doing it in the eyes of the unions and employees. So how do we provide that for all Australian employees? Small businesses simply can't do it. They've got a burden of tax anyway. Every small business person usually works 7 days a week, blah, blah, blah. Employees are critical to them. They want to keep them in the business. So just as you'd look after their physical health to keep them, not just to keep them working, but to do the right thing by them, you should be looking after their mental health.
I love it. You know what? The fact is that Small business owners today collect the GST for the government.
They
They collect the tax. They collect the PAYG tax that they ultimately pay. They pay the superannuation, about to go up.
Yes,
So in other words, they
possibly,
pay for people's retirement, take the burden away from the government purse. So if anything, the government should actually put these things in place. Like you just said,
Exactly.
an employee assistance plan.
Program, an
EAP in there for people with mental health problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
And maybe just extend the one they currently got for the public service for private sector.
Mark, 1 in 5 of us will at some stage in our lives have a mental illness. No, I'm not talking about 1 in 35. 1 in 5 of us, 20% of your workforce. You've got 10 staff, 2 of them on average at some stage in your life, in their lives. So why not help them through it? Why not get them to the other side of it? It won't be the answer. They might end up referring you on to somebody else who gives you more help and the like. But I think it would make an enormous difference for Australia and for small businesses. And it shows, it'll show that the government cares about them, but it keeps them productive. We talk about productivity all the time.
Yeah.
You've got somebody in the workplace who's getting beaten up at home. You get someone in the workplace who's really unwell. They might be there, but they're not productive. So it's another way. It's actually a way of improving productivity.
And
so
if you're a small business person running your business, and you're completely overwhelmed with all your accounts and your bills, same deal.
You got no time to worry about that.
No, but you might be depressed.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Equally, and just on the side, like one of the things you're recommending as well on top of all this, so is that if I see somebody who I know is in small business, if you're out there and you see something, someone in small business who's doing it tough, you're saying that ask them the question straight up, no bullshit,
exactly,
just straight to the point. Make sure that the worst possible outcome is not an outcome that is on their mind. Yeah. If it is on their mind, then do something about it.
Well, I'm guessing, knowing you as I do, that you'd ask them a blunt question about their business. You wouldn't put pussyfoot around. You're mentoring somebody. You say, how are you going? How's your P&L?
Would I ask the other question is another one. And I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And
you should.
Just like I would ask you a question about how's your business going, and I wouldn't stuff around. It's straight talk. That's what this is about. I think you're saying be straight with them.
Yeah, if you're mentoring a small business person and they're clearly unwell, they're clearly unwell physically, you'd say, mate, are you okay? Look, you're overweight, or is your heart okay? Or look, have you seen your doctor? You'd have those because it's the whole of the person, isn't it? Right? I mean, small business is somebody's life. They don't go home on the weekend the way that I go home on the weekend. So it's their life every day. Somebody calls in sick on Sunday, they turn up and fill the shift, right? They don't shut the doors. So their physical health is an issue. They put that second often, just as they do their mental health.
Everything's second. Small business. Everything is second in small business.
Yeah.
So what would you say? If you're a small business owner, they're struggling, what's your advice to them to get them through to the next period? What would you sort of say? I know it's a tough question, but they've got the prospect of JobKeeper being dropped off.
Yep.
They've got the prospect of all the rentals the rent's going to start kicking in again, and sometimes September. What should they be thinking about? I mean, or should they just go about their business day to day and just hope that everything's going to change? I mean, where do they have to be? What's the mindset of these poor buggers out there who are trying to survive?
Well, one of the things, and I've got a mate who's a business mentor, small business mentor. One of the things is there's never been a more important time to rethink your business. He was telling me a story about a husband and wife who ran a business, a cafe, 5 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. Employed a number of people. They thought, well, this is just crazy. We'll just do the morning, close in the afternoon. We'll cut out half our inventory because nobody buys it anyway, end up throwing it away. And they're making more money and they've got rid of most of their stuff. That's not a good thing for employment. But now's a good time to rethink your business. I'm sure people are doing that in many ways and you're seeing that. But I'm not somebody who can give advice on that necessarily. Now's a good time to take stock of your mental health as well. Working all those hours isn't always good for your mental health.
Why are you doing it?
You're flogging yourself. Why are you flogging yourself?
Because what happens is every year or every week of every year for a 10-year period, let's say, if you're in business, what we tend to do is that we just load up. We just keep loading up, and we never actually take a step back and say,
Correct.
Why am I doing that? What's the outcome? Where do I want to land? Why am I doing this?
And I find this in bigger business, right? You get to a point, particularly at board meetings, right, where somebody says, hold on, why are we doing that? And you say, well, 10 years ago that went wrong, so we did this. Yeah, but that was 10 years ago, and everything's changed since then, so why are we still doing it? So asking yourself why is important. But it's hard if you're just slogging up the hill every day. I understand that. On a mental health thing, take stock of your mental health, take stock of your relationships. And I always say, this is a very personal thing, Mark, don't do the things that you know you don't like doing. I mean, we're all trained as we grow up as kids to do things. You know, you've got to go to this person's house, you've got to like auntie so-and-so, whatever it is. I now cut that stuff out of my life. The things I know are going to upset me, I just cut out of my life. And people think, wow, you know, and that includes family. That's a big call. That includes family. I always say there's a reason why families only catch up on Christmas Day once a year, because they don't like each other. So why force yourself into these stressful situations? So I like to cut out the clutter in my life and say, I don't have to do that anymore. And that person only upsets me. And I get stressed about it for the week before the meeting. I get upset on the day. I get set up and I'm upset for 2 weeks. And my husband tells me, why the hell are you doing that? So listen to some of that advice. And of course, if you're really, really struggling and you feel very mentally unwell, please ring Lifeline. We're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
What's the number again?
13 11 14. But here's the thing. A lot of small business people have a lot of pride in what they do, and they should, right? Because their name's on the door, or this is the dream they've always had. The great thing about Lifeline, 13 11 14, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't care who you are. We don't judge you. We don't care what you've done to whoever you've done. We don't care if you've... You know, we don't care about that. We care about getting you through this difficult time. And we're anonymous because... And people would say, why would you ring up somebody anonymous and pour your heart out? Well, because you're too embarrassed to tell your business partner. You're too embarrassed to tell your kids. You're too embarrassed to tell your husband or wife. And that's the benefit. People like calling Lifeline because it is anonymous. They can pour out their heart and we can get you through that difficult time. So we've been around for 57 years. We've never had as many calls as we've had in the last few months. We've been able to answer most of those calls. So we've never had so many calls. We've never had so many calls answered at the same time. Our volunteers have been fantastic. They've upped their shift hours. They've come in more. They've worked even harder. And we think those numbers could get higher and could get worse. So we're there for people. We're there to get them through difficult times and hopefully to patch them up and get them going again. Many people will only ring Lifeline once in their life and it'll be at a point. And you meet a lot of people who say, oh, you know, 20 years ago, it's not 2 months ago, it's usually 20 years ago I rang Lifeline and they saved my life. They got me through that difficult period. And we're very pleased to do that. We're there to do that. We have wonderful people at the other end of the phone and all we care about is keeping you alive.
I love it. This has been, but I mean, the two things I just got out of that in that last part, the last couple of paragraphs, is that one, don't walk around with a burden on your shoulders. Empty the backpack.
Yep.
What's in there? You just keep accumulating shit all your life in your backpack. Start taking a few things out. Stop carrying that burden around. Lighten your load. Lighten your backpack. And by the way, if once you've done that, and I don't mean that literally, but I do mean that in a sense. Once you've done that, if for some reason you feel depressed or you don't feel like you can get out of it, what you've got to do is you've got to make a start, and your start could be at Lifeline. It's anonymous, 24 hours, 7 days a week, no judgments, just help, just advice. And here's a guy living proof of these things. I'm very appreciative that he's come here to talk to us. We have gone through an extraordinarily difficult time in Australia. If you're a business person out there, lighten your backpack, use this COVID period to reassess where you are. Take a step back and have a look, what am I doing? What don't I like doing? If I don't like doing it, if it's not an integral part of the business, get rid of it. And then after that, if you still can't see your way clear, reach out. So I want to thank John Brogden. Thanks for your honesty, mate.
My pleasure.
And I know the Lifeline role is, it's free of charge. This
voluntary,
is voluntary. I mean, you do this, but you do it with such passion and such commitment. Not many people would. I have to be able to justify the time that you spend on it, but also not many people do it at all. And we need people like you who have such experience and will to run these organisations or to sit at the top of these organisations. I'm sure that there's lots of people in the organisation who run it as well, but it's so important. I don't think there's enough recognition of people like yourself, John. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate it on behalf of all those people who access Lifeline from day to day.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Good on you.